They test at 145, 150, 160 or higher. Top 1% of human intelligence. You call them gifted. They call it a curse. You believe high IQ is advantage, that being smarter than everyone else means life is easier, that intelligence solves problems, that cognitive superiority translates to happiness or success or fulfillment. You think people with extremely high IQ have it better than you, but extremely high intelligence without corresponding emotional and social development is not gift. It is psychological prison. It is being trapped in your own head with thoughts that never stop, analysis that never shuts off, pattern recognition that prevents you from experiencing anything directly. It is seeing through everything so completely that nothing feels real or meaningful anymore. The person with IQ of 150 is not living better life than you. They are isolated in ways you cannot understand, unable to connect with 99% of humans because the cognitive gap is too large to bridge. They manipulate without effort because they see social dynamics as simple systems. They overthink everything until spontaneity is impossible. They are depressed at rates far higher than average population because they see meaninglessness others are protected from by cognitive limitations. High IQ without wisdom is not intelligence. It is intellectual capacity deployed in service of ego, defense mechanisms, emotional avoidance, and chronic disconnection from direct human experience. It is being able to analyze everything while understanding nothing that matters. It is solving complex equations while being unable to maintain basic relationship. What follows is not celebration of high IQ. It is exposure of the dark psychology that accompanies extreme intelligence when it develops without corresponding emotional maturity, social intelligence, or wisdom. This is what nobody tells you about being cognitively superior. They can solve differential equations, speak 5 languages, master complex systems instantly, but they cannot read the room, cannot understand why people are upset. You call this genius. It is emotional underdevelopment. Here is what nobody tells you about extremely high IQ. Cognitive intelligence and emotional intelligence are separate systems, and developing one to extreme degree often comes at cost of the other. The person with IQ of 160 has spent their entire life in their head, optimizing for cognitive performance, learning to process information at speeds others cannot match. But they never learned to process emotions or read social cues or understand human needs that are not rational. They can predict stock market trends but cannot predict that their partner is about to leave them. They can write sophisticated analysis of human behavior but cannot understand why their friend is hurt by something they said. They can master quantum physics but cannot grasp that people do not operate according to logic and that emotional needs are not problems to solve through reasoning. This creates bizarre split where person is genius in cognitive domain but functionally incompetent in emotional domain. They analyze their own emotions like external phenomena they are studying rather than experiencing them directly. They intellectualize everything, turn feelings into concepts, relationships into systems to optimize, human needs into puzzles to solve through application of logic. Watch them in social situation. They miss every subtle cue. They do not notice when someone is uncomfortable, when the mood has shifted, when they have said something inappropriate. They keep explaining their point logically when the issue was never about logic but about feelings they cannot perceive. They wonder why people get emotional about things that are objectively minor because they genuinely cannot access the emotional reality others are living in. This is not cute quirk. This is serious developmental deficit that prevents genuine intimacy and leaves them fundamentally alone even when surrounded by people. They cannot connect at emotional level because emotions are foreign language they never learned. They attempt to relate through intellect, through interesting conversation, clever observations, impressive knowledge, but human connection requires emotional attunement they do not possess. The high IQ person is emotionally younger than their chronological age, often by decades. They are brilliant child in adult body, unable to meet others at emotional maturity level that relationships require. They are alone, always alone, even in relationships, even surrounded by people. They blame others for not understanding them. You call this isolation. It is narcissistic assumption that everyone else is the problem. The person with extremely high IQ lives in permanent isolation because the cognitive gap between them and average person is too large for genuine connection. They process information faster, see patterns others miss, understand complexities others cannot grasp. This makes normal conversation feel unbearably slow, makes most people seem boring or limited, makes genuine intellectual connection nearly impossible to find. But here is what they will not admit. The isolation is not just about the gap. It is about their contempt. They are not lonely because they cannot find intellectual equals. They are lonely because they have decided that everyone below their IQ threshold is not worth genuine engagement, is fundamentally limited, is less than. They sit in conversation, pretending to listen while internally judging how slow the other person is, how obvious their points are, how simple their understanding is. They feel superior even when they are performing interest. They experience most human interaction as tedious obligation rather than genuine connection because they have categorized most humans as intellectually inferior and therefore not worth their full presence. This contempt masquerades as intellectual honesty. They tell themselves they are just being realistic about cognitive differences, that they cannot help that most people cannot keep up, that it is not their fault they see things others miss. They frame their arrogance as objective assessment rather than recognizing it as defense mechanism, protecting them from vulnerability of actual connection. The truth they avoid. They are choosing isolation. They could connect with people at emotional level, could find value in relationships that are not primarily intellectual, could appreciate others for qualities beyond cognitive performance. But this would require vulnerability, would require admitting they need others, would require coming down from intellectual high ground, where they feel safe and superior. Instead, they maintain distance, blame the gap, feel sorry for themselves for being too intelligent to connect with average humans. They construct entire identity around being misunderstood genius, rather than recognizing they are choosing isolation to avoid emotional intimacy that intelligence cannot control or master. They are not lonely because they are too smart. They are lonely because they use intelligence as excuse to avoid genuine human connection that would require emotional vulnerability they cannot tolerate. They see you as system. Calculate your motivations, predict your responses, manipulate the variables, get the outcome they want. You call this social skills. It is treating humans like machines they can program. Extremely high IQ often comes with dangerous capability, ability to see social dynamics as systems to analyze and optimize, to predict human behavior with accuracy that makes manipulation effortless, to understand what makes people tick and use that understanding for personal benefit. This is not emotional intelligence. It is mechanical understanding of human psychology deployed without empathy or ethical constraint. They watch you and they learn your patterns. What makes you feel validated? What triggers your insecurity? What you need to hear to trust them? What buttons to push to get specific reaction? They are not relating to you. They are studying you like science experiment, collecting data about your responses, building model of how you work that they can exploit. The manipulation is not always malicious. Often, it is just how they operate. They see problem, they want something from you, they analyze the system, your psychology and motivations, they implement solution, say the things that will generate desired response. They do not experience this as manipulation because from their perspective they are just being effective, just using their intelligence to get what they want. But you are not puzzle to solve. You are a human being whose emotions and needs and autonomy matter beyond their utility in generating outcomes they desire. When they say exactly what you need to hear to feel seen, when they adjust their presentation to appeal to your specific vulnerabilities, when they engineer your responses through calculated inputs, they are treating you like machine they can program rather than person they are connecting with. This is why relationships with extremely high IQ individuals often feel off even when they seem perfect. Something is missing. The warmth is performed. The understanding is calculated. They know what to say, but it does not come from genuine emotional resonance. It comes from analysis of what response is strategically optimal. Watch how they talk about relationships and conflicts. They describe them like chess games. They analyze what went wrong like debugging code. They approach human interaction as problem-solving exercise rather than as emotional experience. They cannot understand why you feel manipulated when they are just being intelligent about how to get needs met. They have mistaken ability to predict and control human behavior for genuine connection. They think understanding how you work means they understand you. They do not. They know they are smarter than you. They make sure you know it too. Subtle comments, correcting minor details, explaining what you already understand. You call this helpful. It is constant demonstration of their intellectual superiority. The person with extremely high IQ often cannot help but demonstrate it. Not through explicit bragging, that would be crude, but through constant subtle reminders that they see what you miss, understand what you do not grasp, know things you have not learned. Every conversation becomes opportunity to showcase their intelligence, to correct your errors, to add complexity you did not consider. You make casual statement, they add qualification. Well, actually, it is more nuanced than that. You share article, They point out the methodological flaws you did not notice. You express opinion. They explain the logical inconsistencies in your reasoning. They are not trying to be difficult. They genuinely cannot resist correcting what they perceive as errors or oversimplifications. But underneath the correction is contempt. They do not just think they are smarter than you. They think your cognitive limitations make you fundamentally less capable of understanding reality accurately, less able to think clearly, less valuable as thinker. They tolerate you, but they do not respect your intellectual capacity. This contempt leaks through in how they explain things. They over-explain concepts you already understand because they assume you need more help than you do. They use unnecessarily complex language because they enjoy demonstrating their vocabulary. They reference obscure theories because they like that you do not know what they are talking about. Every interaction is performance of intellectual dominance disguised as helpfulness or precision. Watch how they respond when you actually do know something they do not. The discomfort is visible. They either dismiss the information as unimportant, immediately demonstrate they actually did know it, but just did not mention it, or find some way to re-establish their superior position. They cannot tolerate being the less knowledgeable person in the room because intelligence is their entire identity and value system. They have organized their self-worth around being smarter than others, which means they need you to be less smart to feel secure. Your ignorance is not a problem to solve through teaching. It is confirmation of their superiority that they need to maintain. They are not helping you understand. They are helping themselves feel superior. The intelligence is real. The arrogance is real. The contempt is real. And you feel all of it, even when they think they are hiding it. Their mind never stops. Every experience analyzed, every interaction dissected, every moment interpreted. They cannot just be present. You call this overthinking. It is inability to experience life directly without intellectual mediation. Here is the curse nobody tells you about. When your IQ is extremely high, you cannot turn off the analysis. You cannot watch movie without deconstructing narrative structure and predicting plot. You cannot have conversation without analyzing subtext and calculating optimal responses. You cannot experience emotion without immediately intellectualizing what it means and why it is happening. Everything passes through cognitive filter before you can experience it. You are always thinking about what is happening rather than experiencing what is happening. You are always one step removed from direct engagement with reality because your mind is processing, analyzing, categorizing, interpreting everything before you can just feel it or be in it. This makes spontaneity impossible. They cannot dance without thinking about how they look, cannot tell joke without analyzing whether it will land, cannot express emotion without first evaluating whether the emotion is justified. They live entirely in their heads, watching their own lives from analytical distance rather than actually living them. Watch them try to do something simple like enjoy a meal. They are not tasting the food. They are analyzing the flavors, comparing to other meals, evaluating the restaurant's choices, thinking about the chemistry of cooking. The direct experience of enjoying food is inaccessible because analysis has replaced experience. This extends to relationships. They cannot be present with a partner because they are analyzing the relationship dynamics, predicting where conflicts will arise, optimizing their behavior for best outcomes. They cannot just love someone, they must understand why they love them, whether the love is rational, what the evolutionary purpose of the feeling is. The overthinking also creates paralysis. When you can see all possible outcomes and analyze all variables and consider every angle, making simple decisions becomes impossible. They stand in grocery store for 10 minutes choosing cereal because they are calculating nutritional value against cost, against environmental impact, against taste preferences, against convenience. What normal person does automatically becomes exhausting optimization problem. They are not living life. They are simulating life through constant analysis while the actual experience passes them by unnoticed. The intelligence that lets them understand everything prevents them from experiencing anything directly. They think being smart means they understand life better. Actually, it means they never really live it. They understand everything, see through every illusion, recognize the meaninglessness, the absurdity of it all. They cannot unsee it. You call this depression. It is cognitive burden of seeing too clearly. Extremely high IQ correlates with depression, anxiety, and existential despair at rates far higher than general population. This is not coincidence. When you are intelligent enough to see through the comfortable illusions most people live within, when you understand that meaning is constructed and values are arbitrary and significance is story we tell ourselves, you lose the protective cognitive limitations that allow others to experience life as meaningful. They see the universe as mechanistic process without purpose. They recognize that human significance is delusion, that your achievements will be forgotten, that nothing you do matters in the grand scheme. They understand that consciousness is likely just emergent property of complex neural networks, and that your sense of self is constructed narrative rather than real entity. They know too much to believe in anything. This intellectual clarity creates existential void. When you understand that morality is socially constructed, how do you justify caring about anything? When you recognize that free will is probably illusion, how do you feel responsible for your choices? When you see that all human endeavor is ultimately meaningless, why bother doing anything? Most people are protected from this void by cognitive limitations that allow them to believe in purpose and meaning and significance. But extremely high IQ person sees through these beliefs and cannot go back to comfortable ignorance. They understand that the meaning others feel is just neurological response, not actual metaphysical truth. The depression this creates is not chemical imbalance. It is logical response to seeing reality without the comforting filters most people have. They are not depressed because something is wrong with them. They are depressed because they understand too clearly that existence is arbitrary and meaning is constructed and nothing actually matters. Some respond with hedonism. If nothing matters, might as well pursue pleasure. Some respond with nihilism. If nothing matters, why bother with anything? Some respond with desperate attempt to create meaning through achievement or legacy or contribution. But all of them are haunted by knowledge they cannot unknow, that they are sophisticated biological machines processing information in universe that does not care whether they exist. Intelligence has given them clarity. Clarity has taken everything that makes life feel worth living. They are smart enough to understand existence, but not wise enough to find meaning despite that understanding. They intellectualize their trauma, analyze their relationships, theorize about their emotions, never actually feel anything directly. You call this self-awareness. It is using intelligence as defense mechanism against vulnerability. The extremely high IQ person uses their intelligence to avoid emotional experience. When painful feeling arises, they immediately intellectualize it, analyze where it came from, what childhood experience caused it, what cognitive distortion is contributing to it. They turn emotions into objects of study, rather than experiences to feel and process. This creates illusion of emotional sophistication. They can talk eloquently about their psychology, describe their attachment patterns, explain their defense mechanisms. But this is not emotional intelligence or self-awareness. It is intellectual defense against feeling emotions that would be overwhelming if experienced directly. They describe their childhood trauma like case study. They analyze their relationship patterns like research project. They discuss their depression like interesting psychological phenomenon. The emotions themselves remain at safe analytical distance where they can be understood without being felt. This defense protects them from vulnerability that terrifies them. If they intellectualize emotion, they maintain control over it. If they analyze the relationship, they do not have to risk genuine intimacy. If they theorize about their needs, they do not have to admit they need others in ways they cannot predict or manage. Watch them in therapy. They analyze the therapeutic relationship. They explain their patterns to the therapist before therapists can observe them. They intellectually understand everything about themselves while changing nothing because the understanding is defense against the feeling that would actually catalyze change. The intelligence has become prison. It prevents them from having direct emotional experience, from being present with discomfort, from allowing themselves to be vulnerable with another person. They think they are more self-aware than others because they can articulate their psychology so clearly. Actually, they are more defended than others because they can use intelligence to avoid ever actually being present with their emotional reality. They have mistaken ability to think about emotions for ability to feel emotions. They have confused understanding their psychology intellectually with actually doing emotional work. They believe that analyzing the problem is the same as resolving it. The intelligence is not serving them. It is protecting them from having to be human, from having to feel, from having to be vulnerable in ways that intelligence cannot control or predict or defend against. They are not wise. They are defended, and they are using their intelligence to stay defended. Extremely high IQ is not advantage, not gift, not superiority. It is cognitive capacity without corresponding emotional or social development. It is intelligence without wisdom. The dark psychology of extremely high IQ reveals that cognitive superiority without emotional maturity, social intelligence, and wisdom creates Emotional underdevelopment. They can solve complex problems but cannot read basic social cues or understand human emotional needs. Social isolation. They are profoundly alone because they use intelligence to maintain distance and superiority rather than building genuine connection. Manipulation. They treat people like systems to optimize rather than humans to connect with. Arrogance. They organize identity around being smarter than others and need to constantly demonstrate superiority. Chronic overthinking. They cannot experience anything directly because analysis mediates every experience. Depression. They see through comforting illusions others live within and cannot unsee meaninglessness. Defense mechanisms. They use intelligence to avoid vulnerability and emotional experience. High IQ without corresponding development in emotional and social intelligence is not gift. It is developmental imbalance that creates dysfunction. The person who is brilliant cognitively but stunted emotionally is not superior to person with average IQ and high emotional maturity. They are different type of limited. The path forward for high IQ individual is not celebrating their intelligence, but recognizing its limitations. Intelligence does not make you better than others. It makes you better at specific type of problem solving. It does not make you wise, does not make you emotionally mature, does not make you capable of genuine intimacy, does not make your life meaningful. Real development requires what intelligence cannot provide. Emotional vulnerability, genuine human connection, acceptance of limitations, humility about what you do not understand, wisdom that comes from experience rather than analysis, capacity to be present without mediating through intellect. The extremely high IQ person must learn what average person knows naturally, that life is meant to be lived, not just understood. That connection matters more than being right. That vulnerability creates intimacy that analysis cannot. That meaning is created through engagement, not discovered through intellect. Intelligence is tool. Without wisdom, emotional maturity, and humility, it is tool deployed in service of ego and defense mechanisms. This is not superiority. This is another form of human limitation that happens to look impressive.